Hi everyone, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name is Vin PF and welcome to another episode of Dram Slam. Before we get into today's guest, I just want to remind everybody that this is a podcast as well as a video. So if you're watching on YouTube and you prefer podcasts, you can just check that out on Dram Slam on any of your favourite platforms. And of course, we have merchandise now as well. We've got the Dram Slam t-shirts. If you're watching the video, you can see I'm wearing that right now. And a final thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers because this is what we do. You know, you make this sort of thing happen. Let's get into today's guest then. We've got Mike Collings, who is founder of the Spencer Collings Company and has a long, illustrious career in the industry. One of the forefathers of whiskey, as you'll find out. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm great. And welcome to the Dram Slam, I think, is for me. This has been an interesting experience.
Yeah, and it's good because the idea behind these things is to have the same six whiskies throughout the season. You know, as you'll know in front of you, we've got the Jura 18, one of yours, the Firkin 49, the Fireball, one of mine, the Aberfeldy, the McMira Svenska Rook, and the 770 Peated, which we'll go through kind of one question at a time. But I guess the first thing we like to do when we're trying the Jura 18 is talk about your whiskey origin story. Obviously, you've been in whiskey professionally for many years, but were you into whiskey before you started in that, and how did that come about?
Uh, kind of. I mean, I was introduced to whiskey in a large dose on my 21st at Sussex University in good old 1971. That was in black and white for those watching. Um, but, you know, that was good because that taught me that with too much whiskey on board, you can't do everything. And I learned to do a very rapid 100 yards crawl in one of the moats at university. So that was my introduction to kind of excess whiskey drinking. Then after that, I found out actually I quite liked it. So I joined the wine and spirit trade. And then, so this year, I think I'll celebrate about 45 years in whiskey, which is it's gone really quickly because it's great fun. And if you're having fun, it rolls through quite quickly. So I've also worked on quite a few brands as well. So
Yeah, absolutely, and we've got a good few questions about those a bit later on because I know that you've worked on some. I mean, if people don't know who you are, they'll know the whiskies that you created for sure. So yeah, when we start off with the Jura 18 because it's kind of like a nice entryway into it. I'm assuming you've probably tried most of these already. Maybe not with some of the newer ones, but something like this. Is this kind of like on a par with the kind of whiskies that you would normally drink as a consumer?
not really, but you know, I'm not sure. You know, it's not like one of these whiskey competitions when everybody gets 96 for turning up. And I think that we should be quite honest about what we're tasting and what we feel. But it's a personal choice. But I think this is very commercial. It's I think it's quite nice. It's got it wouldn't actually hit my top drawer, and I'm quite surprised for an 18-year-old. It's quite thin around the edges, which I'm surprised at. But I think it's that's the kind of thing with age. Is not age doesn't equal older is not better. Well, not apart from me, that is.
Of course, yeah.
No, I think it's quite a commercial dram. It's oaky, it's spirity. I think I just find it a little bit spirity, and I'm surprised that it's an 18-year-old. But you know, I mean, for the retail price, I think it's probably quite a good offering.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Is I mean, we talk about this a lot on this show. Is that if you just take into account the 18 and the price, then it's great. But yeah, I mean, I have to say your comments mirror pretty much everybody along. You know, it's inoffensive. It's a great way of starting a tasting. Um, do I reach for it very often? No. And after I finish these Dram Slams, it'll probably sit on my shelf for a while. Um, just because there's always better flavors around. But I don't think it's trying hard to be too much, I guess.
And I think it's quite an honest kind of middle of the road, but it doesn't actually give me all of those wonderful kind of vibes. So, and it's quite strange, isn't it? Because it's a bit like wine. Some of the wines that you get that are actually, you know, relatively inexpensive sometimes are much better than some of their much more expensive compatriots. So I think tasting it blind is always a good choice. And with this, it's a look at the label's worth 30 years experience, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. We do try to do blind stuff. It's interesting as well because
Very misleading, though.
yeah,
You can make an
um,
absolute fool of yourself quite easily.
oh, it's awful. I mean, we always when we do blind tastings, we always caveat it with obviously that anything can change, anything can influence how you're tasting things. Um, and obviously, I mean, if people don't know, you live over in Australia right now, so it's to get these drams to you was it was shocking, wasn't it?
A nightmare. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and can you imagine what would happen if I'd have sent over unlabeled samples?
Oh, no. It's. I mean, when we get to the Vin one, it's like this is what happened. So you always get a leaker, and it bleached out. It bleached out what was on the label, and I'm going, I wonder what that is. And I smelt it, and I thought, I think I know what that might be. And then I looked at it and thought, Jesus, I got it right. Ish. But anyway,
It's definitely a good opportunity to move on to the next one because I think we're going to talk about this one for a bit of time. The next one, obviously, is the Firkin 49, which is yours.
yep. I think I like this. No, it's. I think it's a classic example of what I set out to achieve, which was to take a distillery and actually take it to the next level. What I believe is the next level, because I think you can with a combination of uh, interesting oak regimes, okay, and pairing the style of whiskey with the type of wine or conditioning wine that you're using. So most finishes just take the standard approach, and there's no pairing at all. There's no matching. It's a bit like you know taking a light white wine and saying let's have a vindaloo with it. It don't happen. You just kill your taste buds or whatever. So you got to like with like. I think we do two. I set out to do two things with Firkin, but apart from having a lot of fun, and I'll come back to that. But you know, the whole thing with Firkin is to do two things. One is we have our own oak custom casks, which are a combination of two types of oak. First fill bourbon. So we take a first fill bourbon cask and then tuck it apart and then interleave French oak, new French oak with it. So you get the combination of what I call that classic vanilla flavor from the bourbon, yeah, and the heavy char, with that much more like a mocha coffee, lighter roasted flavors that you get out of new French oak with a light char. Put those two together, you've got something very unique in an oak profile. So start off with a great oak profile, and then, with something like Tullibardine, which is I think is quite a light whiskey, you need to pair it with something that doesn't overpower it. So, we took a 50-50 mix of good Oloroso, right, and a good Amontillado. So Oloroso gives you that kind of creamy, a little bit of sweetness, creaminess. And creaminess, in my mind, you get that kind of raisiny sweetness, a little bit of that. And then you get the kind of nutty dryness. Put the two together of the Amontillado, put the two together, and after about 2 years in our custom cask, you actually get something that's much more kind of, you can still recognize the original spirit, which is not overpowered, and that's what I think is the balance that you need to get.
And I was going to ask, do you think it's more challenging to do your kind of pairing process with a smoky whiskey or a lighter whiskey? I mean, I think I know the answer, but
you've got to choose something that actually goes with something. So with our peaty whiskey, which is Kalila, we use masala. And Masala's got this rich intensity. And I think that's a perfect fit with Kalila. I'm going to experiment with some of the other ones. I'm going to experiment with a Muscat, but not a European Muscat, an Australian Muscat, which is much more intense. Some have got some of these orangey flavours, but it really is a darker, much more darker Muscat, and it's higher in alcohol. So we're going to experiment with that. But I think that you've got to have something that matches. It's a bit like the old thing with white wine and fish. It's like you can use a bloody great. You can, if you love Shiraz, do it. But it depends what your taste buds are acclimatized to. But it's I think you need that balance, and I think there's a lot of finishes out there that actually, what I would describe as sherry bombs, where it's, what is the whiskey that it started with?
Yeah, no, I agree. I won't pick on any dram in particular, but I've covered some whiskies before where I've covered the standard version of it and then a cask strength version of it, and I found that the cask strength version was just a bit too much. And people sort of say, well, you should water it down. It's like, yeah, that's fair enough, but I tend to review as is. That's my MO. But yeah, it's sometimes every now and again. Sometimes it's just a little bit too much. And I think that's the important distinction between yours and a lot of whiskies is that it's not even just crafted specifically; it's all the extra stuff as well, isn't it? It's the wood and the pairing between the fortified wines. And you try these whiskies quite frequently as well, don't you?
Yeah, I try. I know it's hard yards, but I try and do that every cask every 6 months, because I think that you can actually profile a cask, and sometimes you can say, well, it's at a certain age, it's going to be after 15 months, it's probably going to do pretty well, and then sometimes you get a cask coming along and you go, this is not ready at all, and it just goes to the back of the pile. So I mean, luckily we're small enough and we're boutique enough actually to kind of, you know, if it's not ready, it's not ready. It's ready when it's ready, but it's not ready. It's tough.
Yeah, as I said earlier, we'll talk about your kind of your career a bit later because this is kind of like a retirement project for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually gone quite well actually. It's turned to a business. My wife's not very happy.
Straight back into work.
Should have retired at 70 something. Whoops. I actually done. I'm a serial retiree. I try it, but then I get bored, and then But anyway, and it's great fun when you experiment with good drams. And it's the other thing about this industry. It's very social, and it's you can be big competitors, but at the end of the day, it's quite fun.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we obviously I'm sort of on the sidelines of the main industry, being a kind of social commenter. But even in my space, there's competition. But we always subscribe to the idea that if we all grow together, then we all grow. So we tend to help each other out a lot, even though we're technically direct competitors. But it's that congruency I think is really important in the whiskey industry.
I think it is, but I think we've also got to. I mean, for me, why I started Firkin was I thought everything was getting far too serious out there, and I think the approach was, drinking malt whiskey is about fun and enjoyment. And if I get any more of the kind of, well, you've got to do it this way, you've got to do it that way, and actually you get this monotone about what you should go through, and it's like, no, it's not. It's drinking malt whiskey is enjoying it, yeah. And enjoying it isn't how much social cachet knowledge you've got. It's kind of it's actually about the enjoyment of the whiskey, and that's why we took the approach with Firkin, starting with the name, of course, which is obviously tongue in cheek, but it's also a small cask that's never used for whiskey maturation. But it injects humour and actually takes away some of that pretentiousness that you get around whiskey. Now, of course, we've never run across this, have we? It's like, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be fair, I'll drink to that. I'll give you a cheers for that.
Cheers.
Mm.
And that's what it's all about, I think.
I think actually, the not taking it too seriously is a good segue into the next one. I don't know if you've ever drank a Fireball before.
No.
So this is going to be an interesting one. Actually, when I was talking to, because I know you work with Ed at Top Whiskies a lot, he's your UK guy, and I was talking to him about this, and he was like, "I cannot wait to see Mike drink a Fireball." So what we like to do on this one, I have got a question for this, but we like to sort of drink this together because I think it's dreadful, but
Jesus. I tell you, sniff that in both nostrils, it would kill COVID stone dead, wouldn't it? Well, well, yeah.
I can only apologise.
No, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's real shooter territory, but the nose and the taste are absolutely in sync. I get overwhelmingly chemical cinnamon.
Yeah.
And it's sickly sweet. Christ, it makes Southern Comfort look gold standard. Has it got any redeeming features? I think if I was 19 years old and in a dark room with and hopefully trying to get a little bit intoxicated, it probably might work, but not really. I think if you drank some, it would repeat on you ad nauseam for months.
No, I think so. My running joke on this show is that I pour this out for every guest, but you can see how much I've actually drank from the bottle because
I think as a shooter, I think it's probably great, but as a kind of experience, no, it makes Southern Comfort look really good.
it's a good vessel for the question I have for you, which is obviously we're going back now again to the start of your whiskey career. How do you think the whiskey industry in the 80s compares to now? Because obviously, when you started doing your thing, for people that don't know, obviously you worked for Diageo and the subsidiaries before, and created the classic malts and some of the Johnnie Walker range. But you created those out of thin air, So, and then now we've got things like, obviously, we've got a wealth of excellence things, but we've also got things like Fireball knocking around. So yeah, how do you think it compares to back then to now?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, if you took 35 years ago, 40 years ago, the level of interest and knowledge about malt whisky was virtually none. So, you had Glenfiddich, and people thought that was kind of an interesting whisky. They weren't quite sure what single malt was. There was Glenfiddich, there was Glen Grant, there was a smattering. I mean, Macallan was just struggling to actually get any traction. I remember starting with Glenfarclas, and then people said, "Well, Glenfarclas, what is it? Is it as good as Black Label?" And I'm going, "Well, actually, it's a single malt." And people go, "Oh yeah, and okay, what's that?" So I think the industry has moved hugely. In '87, when I joined United Distillers, which morphed into Diageo about after 4 or 5 times later, there wasn't any knowledge of malt whisky at all. And, people said to us, well, if you want to launch 6 unknown malt whiskies, you've got to have a good prayer book. And, what we did was actually, and we didn't have any advertising budget. So with the classic malts, we actually went down the fact that it's a journey of discovery and it's about flavour. And going into a pub and it's actually saying, well, actually, we'd like you to stock 6 unknown single malts, and you got that look of that desk there. It's a bit like going to a cash and carry. It's like, you want to do what? But actually, we came up with quite a neat idea, which is now copied ad nauseam, which is that back bar booster, which is it's actually at the front bar. So you had to find a way of getting it over. But the other thing I think that the whole industry has moved forward in terms of knowledge and application. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, barman didn't know anything much about malt whiskey or whiskey, and now they're very knowledgeable. Now, I think that again does cause certain issues because then you've got the other thing, which is everybody's an expert and they can't be told anything new. So it's kind of it's a bit of both. But I think the huge difference is the level of knowledge, and I think it's much wider. It's a bit like when Camera first started with beer, and people used to put a pint of beer up, and if it was cloudy, they send it back. Now cloudy beer is supposed to be nice, and it is nice. It's got lots of flavour. So I think there's a huge difference in knowledge, and I think that also it's a much wider, consumer franchise. You've got much more people enjoying it, and therefore that gives you more playroom.
Without a doubt, I think it's. I mean, for me, it's already changed quite a lot. I've been sort of doing bits and bobs for 10 years or so since I started enjoying whiskey, and it's already changed. Not least for the price, which is always going up, but then it's always backfilling with affordable whiskies behind that. I think obviously now we've got the advent of the no age statement single malt that's kind of started coming in about 5-6 years ago and is now quite prevalent, I think.
So I mean, when we put together Blue Label originally, when was that? 89, 90. We were the first super deluxe brand that went out without an age statement, and people said, "Well, how old is it?" So I said, "Have you tasted it?" I mean, when we started, we called it Oldest, Johnnie Walker Oldest. But then everybody started ordering, "Can we have a Blue Label, please?" I said, Jesus, that's a good one. Why don't we call it Blue Label? Don't push water uphill. But I think that's the difference. And I think the other thing is the advent of social media has actually made it, and YouTube and all this kind of stuff has made it much more accessible.
100%. Actually, good segue to the next whiskey, which is mine.
So I think your packaging could be improved. Look, have you seen this? No, that's what happened. It was a leaker in the thing. So the customs people sent me a long kind of diatribe saying, what is this?
When I was putting this pack together, I approached. I mean, as you can see, even your one, which has done some miles now, they're all officially bottled by the brands because I knew this would happen. But then when I decided to put my own whiskey in, I obviously had to kind of like sort that out myself. I knew that was going to happen, no matter how much parafilm I put around it. But yeah, I'm glad you got a bit of it at least, anyway.
No, it's actually it leaked. All it did was etched over the label. But I think this is actually quite fun.
Yeah, I mean the only thing is, I mean if you haven't got an ABV on there, this is a big spike in ABV up to 59.8. I did this at cast strength, but yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, well, my palate has adjusted to kind of. I spent too many years tasting in tasting rooms, so I find that the odd cast whiskey is fine, but I like to release it a bit. We should have kept hold of it when we had this distillery, but we sold it to Bacardi because we had to. But actually, it's in huge demand as a blended component because it's so damn good. I think Aberfeldy is one of those go-to whiskies. I think it's really quite interesting. It's quite light on oak for me, but it doesn't. You actually get these kind of other things going on, which is like it's a bit of it's honeyed almost. I quite like it. I quite like this. It's quite good.
Thanks. That's good to hear. The sort of question I had around this was sort of leaning into what we were talking about before as well, about obviously how the changes in the industry have happened. Over the years with all spirits, you have a kind of like an ebb and a flow of popularity. Where do you think we are now with whiskey? Do you think we're still on the upward curve, or are we hitting the top of the bell curve now, and it'll probably start coming down again soon?
No, I think we're on the up curve still, because I think that what's happened is that you've got a huge amount of additional distilleries coming in from the New World, and it's woken up some of the more traditional distilleries. So I think that you're actually increased competition is actually giving more kind of innovation, and people are looking at trying to do things. But now the problem is with that is that everybody tends to copycat. You look in the gin industry. If I see another rose tinted gin, pink gin, it's like, oh, do me a favour. If you're gonna have a genre, then do the genre correctly, or do it in a different way that actually adds something differential, or makes it better. And I think there's an awful lot of local whiskies coming out that actually are the pretenders. They're talking a great game, and they're getting great prices that are totally out of sync with what they are. And I hear Australian whiskies, and people say to me, "Oh well, Australian whiskies at 4 years old are equivalent to a UK version at 20 years old," and I go, "Come again?" It's like, do me, it don't work like that. And I think you get certain things that are happening, and you be proud of local ingredients. But if you can't taste the local ingredients, or taste what you can, pick it up and go, can I actually taste the difference? And if you can't, you've got to actually say, well, why does this justify another £20 a bottle or £15 a bottle? And then people play but this is rare, and that's why we release it in 50 centilitre.
It's going to be an interesting one to watch unfold, and as it has been for the last 5 years of me doing the kind of YouTube stuff, because there's so many new distilleries coming out, and in the next decade we're going to be, it's good because we're going to be absolutely swimming in whiskey, and it'll be interesting to see how the prices cope, because every single new brand isn't going to be able to release a £60 first release and get away with it forever. So we'll see how it goes along. But I'm keen to know exactly how it's going to go. And I still think we're on the uptick as well. But it looks like in the next sort of 10 years, it depends on how the fluctuation happens, but it could start going again, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that I think that blended whiskey is going to make a comeback, and I think the blender's art is something else. But the trouble is, people think that the B word is just like the C word. It's like you can't say it. Maybe we go back when I created Johnnie Walker Green. It was the first blended malt whiskey, and never looked back.
I'm actually I'm still yet to review the green label, which is funny because I always cite it as my favourite of the range for the price. Obviously the blue label is great, but is a lot for the average drinker these days anyway. And I really, really love the 12-year-old black label. But yeah, the green label, I think it sits in this perfect price versus experience.
Fabulous Dram, and that's a great example of what you can do by blending layers of flavour.
We're on the back end now, so we're starting to drink some Peat on the home run. Yeah. Obviously you've drunk a lot of whiskey in your time. Do you lean towards Peat or away from Peat usually?
I have moments. No, I think what you get into, it's occasions. So if there's sometimes I just think I'm at the end of a meal, and I'm thinking, what I need, and I'm sitting by the, I'm sitting thinking, what would I like? I'd like something a bit peaty. But there are other times when I think, no, I don't want to do that. I'm looking for something that is somewhat lighter or something in between. I think on our Firkin 10, I quite like that balance I've got with a 10-year-old that I've chosen, which at the moment is Ben Rinnes, with Madeira. And actually that's a great go-to. So I think it's occasions for what you feel like.
Yeah, 100%. I tend to lean towards Peat more often than not, but exactly that. I've got enough choice behind me that I can see how my mood takes me. hopefully this one will be a bit different for you because this is Swedish, and it's got a bit of juniper wood in there to create the smoke. It's got peat as well, but
Yeah, it's very light smoke. It's quite interesting. I find that I didn't know that it was juniper wood, but that explains it. It's got this kind of medicinal kind of smokiness to it, or medicinal sort of flavour to it. It's not like the peaty whiskies from Ireland, but it's also got a young sweetness to it, and there's also, for me, I don't know why, but it's slightly bitter around the edges. I get these kind of bitter notes in it, which I think is actually quite nice. But that's what my palate's telling me. I'd love to see this actually given a little bit more time, but I think it's a very good example of what we were talking about earlier, which is kind of innovation. I tasted something from Cairo Distillery, as I call it, in Finland, and they call it Kira, I call it Cairo, tomato, but they're producing a smoky whiskey, which is very intense, but it's smoky. It's a rye smoky, which is very interesting, and I'd love to get some of that. So I don't know when it's going to be released, but I think it's a good example of this kind of innovation, and I think that that would then come back to kind of what we're doing in Scotland and saying, well, guys, let's play about with smoking the barley in a different way. We can do peat. We can also do kind of, different types of oak. So I think it's going to spur some more innovation. And I think the other thing is that the new distilleries in England and in Scotland and Ireland are actually, looking at how they can differentiate and how they can make stuff new. But I think this is a good example.
You mentioned you were talking about the one of your other Firkin releases there. What I wanted to ask you about as well is obviously you've got the Firkin Whisky Company, but under the umbrella of the Spencer Collins Company, and under that umbrella you've got the two whiskies. Right, I think it's just two, isn't it? The Founders Reserve and the Imperial Tribute. How did those come about, and how do they differentiate from kind of the Firkin business?
Oh, totally different. I mean, Imperial Tribute is really. When I retired, I thought, well, Blue Label was brilliant, and that was a collaboration that actually worked brilliantly, very well. And I thought, well, I'd actually seen and experienced different types of whiskies at different distilleries over the years, and everybody said every time I looked at it, people said, well, you can't do that because it's too bloody expensive. And I thought, well, actually, when I retire, I'm going to do it. So I did it with Imperial Tribute. So I took a 4 decades of whiskey into one bottle, and I took 3 regions and put those together. So you got this layering that goes on, and then we used first. I got some really great, interesting Madeira butts, and the late Jim Swan put me onto these, and he was a great guy because he could sniff a barrel and say, yeah, that's great and that's useless. And so I when I first went up, and John Glazer at Compass Box put me onto Jim Swan, and John's a great guy as well. So I thought, what happens when we do all this? And then we tried it and we put it into the Madeira butts and give it 3 or 4 years, and then end of the day it was like, wow. And then so when we decided that we didn't have that much of it, so we release about 300 bottles a year. But it comes with a hefty price tag. I mean, but we personalize every bottle to order. So it ain't. It's fun. And then the other end of it, we've got what I call a cask strength big Madeira type of. It's a Madeira version of a sherry bomb, I suppose, but it's because it's a cask strength. It actually is a very interesting whiskey. So we've just run out of that, but we're getting some. I'll put some more down, so we'll see what happens down the tracks.
Oh, excellent. I mean, I was lucky enough to try both in a tasting set sort of last year. Yeah, I had them on the channel, and the Founders Reserve was fantastic, obviously, but the Imperial Tribute, which I was kind of expecting to to enjoy as much as the Blue Label, just blew me away. And I'm still like I'm hoping that it stays in stock so that when I've got the money I can buy a bottle, because it's one of those ones, like you said, it's unapologetically expensive, because it's like, I mean, it's in fact, like you said, it's got like, what is it like, it's got some 10 years, some 20 years, some 30 years, and some 40-year stuff in there. That's right, isn't it?
You can't put that on the label
Yeah.
though, otherwise you get burnt at the stake. But we all know what we can say what goes into it, and but you can't put it on the label. I mean, because people then get well, it's actually a 40-year-old. No, it's not a 40-year-old, but it's the confusion. What you actually get is different ages allow you to add different notes into it. So if you've got some very old whiskies, they tend to be a bit leathery and a bit oaky. It's got that. They're slightly musty oaky, and the younger ones are much more fruit forward. So putting them all together, you actually get something that's really great. And I wanted to. I'm also always been a great fan of some great cognac, and I think that the acid test of a brilliant super deluxe whiskey is go back to the glass, the empty glass, half an hour later, and if it's you sit there and go, wow, then you've actually cracked it.
Excellent. Well, we're on to the last one then. This one's another fairly new one from the Glasgow distillery. I don't know if you've tried any of these guys' stuff yet.
No, I haven't.
This one is they're peated, their standard peated expression, but this is only sort of 3-4 years old. It's kind of first fill and PX finished. So be interested to see what you think about it, to be fair.
You get a lot of, I can only describe as burnt sugar treacle on the front end, which I'm surprised at, because the PX doesn't normally give you that. It's the peat is there, but it's
not huge, is it, at all? It's
no.
It's like intermingling. That's what I quite like about it.
But it's also got this bitter oaky type of finish around the edges. It feels like it's been matured in a quarter cask, or something smaller to give it that. Well, if I'm looking at the colour and if it's that young, I'm always suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what wizardry created this, to be honest, because the other two of their core range are lovely.
It's got to be something that's really heavily charred, and it's got to be new, almost new. So if it was new and heavily charred, then you're going to get into that. I mean, I remember doing an own label for Taiwan years ago, and the guy was being an absolute prat. So we chucked as much caramel in it as we could, and it looked as dark as the Ace of Spades. And you could taste the caramel up front. This doesn't do it, but this has got like a treacly kind of start on it. I don't know, how much is it?
So it's about £50.
Well, that's a good example of what I was talking about in terms of local equals very expensive, and I'm going, well, okay. If I'm putting this up against something that is doing it blind, and I'm saying, well, okay, is there something that's going to give me that for £50? What else can I buy? It's got an interesting front end. I would love to see what this looks like in with a few more years on it. But getting that dark that quick has got to be incredibly small, or first a new oak and heavily charred.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they say on the label, matured in virgin oak, finished in PX casks.
Oh, that's nothing like a good virgin oak then.
Yeah, I think they've done well, and the rest of their series is like they're heavy on the experimentation, which is kind of like it. It's almost like I designed these questions for it, right? But the obviously you living in Australia, they've got so many craft distilleries right now,
upwards of 250 now.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, we don't get any of it over here, really. We get, like, obviously the Diageo funded what do you call it? The Starwood. We get that over here, but yeah, how do you think that the kind of industry is growing over there? Do you think that they're going to start getting bigger, or do you think it's going to stay as that kind of craft distillery vibe for a while?
No. There's some really quite major expansion plans, and I think that's sensible. I mean, the malted barley in Australia is probably world standard, probably some of the best you can get, and there's a lot of it. And it's in big supply. It's in big demand from as malted barley for the Japanese brewers and Japanese whiskey people. So they're looking to Australia for that. I think there's a lot of experimentation, as there is around the world. So I think that we've got that, and then I think the size of the Australian domestic market will allow, I think, some fairly rapid expansion. However, we have a government tax that makes us, the liquor tax in Australia is probably the second or third highest in the world, which is nonsense. I mean, it's double the rate of the UK. So, and I think that's going to make it put a break on domestic, but for overseas, then fine. And I think that you've got to, with all of these new distilleries, there's a balance between what they release and what they send out. And people are going to shy away from what I call small size, big dollar price or big pound price, because it's not sustainable. It's great if you want to be a micro distillery for the rest of your life, but if you want to get up to kind of what I call export standard in 3 or 4 or 5 markets, then you've actually got to have some kind of scale. Not in the Diageo sense, but it's you got to lay down stock and have that stock profile that allows you to have some degree of interest and consistency. So if I think that's great, but I can't get any more of it, I'm going to go somewhere else.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, we're seeing that in the kind of English, the up and coming English market now, which is that a lot of the newer distilleries are releasing and selling out special releases, and that's fine. But they end up within 2 weeks on the secondary market, hundreds of bottles, because the flippers are still sort of riding that value. And I think people are slowly getting wise to it, that really what we're arguing about is 3-year-old whiskey here. So, and there's loads of it. There's loads of it around. So people don't need to panic buy or buy on the secondary market for 3 times the value. But we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think it's probably the same over there. I don't know if there's as much of a scrab for it over there, but yeah, it's interesting to see how it's changing.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing is people that actually are going to consume a reasonable amount of whiskey are going to look for value as well as the approach. And I think there's a differentiation that people have got to have. I mean, lots of people now start talking terroir, and it's like, well, always reminds me of that lovely story in the UK with the guy that won the best bottled water for 2 or 3 years, and he was in Manchester, and they found him out because his spring didn't exist, and he was actually taking Manchester town water and putting it through some heavy charcoal filtering, and he and he was selling shed loads of it. And I'm sitting there going, well, how much of this is here versus how much you can actually taste? And I think that I think that we need to get that in balance as well. But at the end of the day, we can have a lot of fun with it as well. Maybe I should do we'll do a Firkin version of terroir. Like, how do you spell it? And how many R's in terroir with two W's? Terroir. Slightly.
I do always struggle with that one.
irrespective, Vin, you got to have fun with it, don't you?
Yeah, and do you know what? Going all the way back to one of the first things you said, and that's exactly it. It's all far too serious now. I mean, I'm on Twitter a lot, and there's some people on there that don't half blow smoke up themselves about their whiskey tasting, and I was like, we're just drinking a brown liquid, guys. You know, like let's everyone just chill out. But yeah, I think that's why I really like your brand. And you know, not only does the whiskey taste great, I think I was going to say earlier as well, the Tully Bodine. I've only just started exploring Tully Bodine as a distillery, and yours is still the best expression of all of theirs that I've tried. And that Lecheg that you released, which is now gone, was just
Yeah, and when I'm older, I can pronounce it properly.
yeah. I mean, I get told off for it because it's meant to be something like Lechik or something like that, or but I always say Lecheg or I don't know. But who cares, man? It's
Oh, I think you have so much fun with people with mispronunciation. People get up themselves with pronunciation. You know, it's like, you know, I think, you know, you've been in that bar when somebody goes, "I'll have one of those Lagavulins," or is it Laffy Frag,
yeah.
or Colliela, or Bunny Haven, and you go, "I don't care, guys." You know, it's like, you know, and I think that's the kind of the approach and humour that you need to have with it, and it's you know, we can have a lot of fun with that with Firkin.
Absolutely. And now that we're at the kind of the end of the tasting, the last sort of question I always ask, or maybe not even a question, more of a statement, is like what's in store for the future of Firkin? Have you got some good casks in store for us? Some exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think we've got some magic stuff coming down the tracks, um, and I think that, you know, what I've tried to do is do some more experimentation. So looking for, you know, different um, quality of wines that actually don't necessarily get an edge, or not being seen, and therefore how do they pair with different whiskies. So, you know, we're going to look at doing and have put down a number of different combinations. Now, some of it is experimentation, and some of it is, you know, looking for a great outcome. But we shall see. I think it'd be great, actually, and I look forward to, you know, a few more releases every year. That we'll, you know, we'll always be in genre of. So, for example, the 49 will always be something that's more on the softer style and more accessible. But you can actually have a lot of interest in there. Whereas, you know, something like the Rare series allows you to do it just virtually everything, and that's what we'll get, I think. And I look forward to sharing a few drams with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for the viewers now, I mean, it's like 10 in the morning for me now, although it was clock change time. So actually, it's really 9 in the morning. So yeah, at time of recording. So it's been interesting to share some breakfast whiskey with you. Although for you, it's what time is it there for you now?
7:45. I've done it the other way around. I've done some Firkin tastings, or we call them evenings of malt madness because we take a different approach to it, you know. But I did one with some Germans, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning. It was like, what am I doing here? But actually, after the first couple of drams, it was like, this is good stuff and enjoyable. So pick your moment, pick your time. But I wouldn't make it a regular habit.
Yeah, I've always said that like if I go to an airport or something like that, and I'm flying at like 9 in the morning, I'll always have a little taster at the duty free if they're going for free. You think, well, why not? So I just consider this like airport time. And I shan't be driving today, even though I've only had a couple of sips. But yeah, that just leads me to say a massive thank you to you for giving up your time for this in your retirement, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
A fabulous, Vinny, because I like what you're doing, because I think your approach is actually quite refreshing, and, you know, I've enjoyed watching your YouTube stuff, and you know, listening to the odd podcast. I think, you know, it's keep on with it because it's great, you know. And I love the kind of no nonsense approach. It's similar to kind of our kudos with and our the way we want to put Firkin across. It's kind of, look, guys, there isn't pretension here. We want to be. We want everybody to enjoy it, and I think that's what you're doing. So, I'll take the Tilibard in and actually give you Slange or cheers.
I'll say cheers to you as well.
Or Kampai, or whatever they're doing in Japan today.
Kampai.
Thanks, Vin. Much appreciated.
Thank you.